Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and today I'm finally going to talk about the Batman Returns, or Batman 2 first draft script written by Sam Hamm from the early 90s. Of course, Batman Returns came out in 92. I think the script was dated 91, maybe even 90, I think 91. This was requested by James123, or at least James reminded me that I committed to talking about this a while back, and I completely forgot about it, and at one point I had a document with all my requests that I ended up losing, and folks helped me piece that back together, and this was a thing that we missed that didn't make it back on there. So thanks a lot to James, whether you were originally the person that asked for this or not, and if it was somebody else, here's that video finally. So this is something of a you made me read, I guess. So this was requested originally off the heels of my review for Sam Hamm's first draft script for Batman 89, which I really liked and was kind of a bittersweet reading experience for me because it is an infinitely better story than Batman 89 was. It's got a third act that actually makes sense. Batman is much more of a fully realized and less reclusive kind of character. It was a lot more traditional, but like modern comics Batman for the time. Like it read very much like a almost direct translation of what the best of the comics looked like right then. It was also a lot more Frank Miller inspired, and I don't want to just repeat my review of that again, but I wanted to mention that to say I thought this might be a really interesting read because Batman 89 is a movie I really like. Batman Returns is a movie that overall I don't care for, and it also looks like a compromised, watered down, I don't even know if watered down is the right way to put it, but kind of a quagmire, kind of a mess. Looks like a whole lot of weird ideas that don't go together, all kind of thrown into one pot, and a lot of just lack of focus in characters and what they want, and a lot of confusion as to with character motivation, and just in almost kind of mean-spirited feeling, kind of cynical piece. And I wondered how much of that stuff was in the original script, like how something Sam Hamm would do would translate to the very bizarre, like almost like anti-story experience that I felt like I got with Tim Burton's Batman Returns, because that movie was a lot more about visuals and feeling a certain way than it was about actually telling a story. And this script certainly isn't that. It is a cohesive narrative. I don't think it's as good as the Batman 89 script. I don't actually think it's particularly great, and I'll get into a lot of the plot points here in a minute. Of course, I'm gonna spoil this because a lot of the reason to do a video like this is to tell folks what was in a script that they might not have the time to sit down and read. This is widely available. This is really easy to find. I'll try to remember to link it in the description, but you can Google this and find it pretty easily. Just the Batman Returns first draft script by Sam Hamm. So let me start by talking about the stuff that Batman Returns did mine this for, and let me say that first draft is somewhat misleading. Like, this is a different script. It was clearly rewritten from the ground up. There's not one line of dialogue that I can think of that made it from this version into Batman Returns. Like, the 89 rough draft script was that movie. There's a lot of scenes that are very reworked, and some scenes that weren't even in 89, but there are places where, when I was reading that script, it was difficult not to kind of rush through certain scenes because I'd seen them before. Nothing like that at all here. Some bits that are very, and some major bits too, that are very reminiscent of what I saw with Batman Returns, but this is a different story. It would have been a different movie, and it's interesting some of the things that later Batman movies kind of echoed or even perhaps borrowed from the script. It's hard to say if this was influential on anything that came later, but I noticed a lot of things that I would see in movies that happened after Batman Returns got made. So the big stuff that is the same, obviously, it is Penguin and Catwoman in the first place. That from the very beginning, those were going to be the villains. they do team up in this. There are a couple of scenes that were clearly reworked for the final version, like when Batman, or excuse me, like when Penguin and Catwoman have kind of a literal cat and bird game between a real cat that one of them is holding and a real bird one of them is holding. That's in this. It's a different scene, but it's there. And they do frame Batman. Penguin doesn't steal the Batmobile like he does in Returns, but they do team up to frame Batman for a totally different crime than they do in Returns, and for kind of a different reason. Like, they do it before they even have had to deal with him at all. It's still set at Christmas time. It still has a scene set during the Gotham tree lighting ceremony. That's there. It's got the bat wings that fold out and turn into a glider. In this version, that's actually set up toward the beginning in a really odd and curious way. Having only read it one time, I kind of wondered if I maybe missed something. But the way it read to me was Batman shows Alfred this kind of new invention that he's working on, and it's that kind of rigid skeleton thing that we get in Batman Begins, but that I guess Batman Returns also kind of had. It just didn't talk about it like that, where he's able to, form it to fit a skeleton, and then he flips out his wings and he's able to glide with it. And when he shows it to Alfred, he's got it on an umbrella, which is kind of this curious foreshadowing for Penguin. And I thought maybe Penguin stole that technology in this instead of, or in addition to the Batmobile. And that doesn't happen. It seems, or if it does, I missed it. The way it read to me was Batman made this thing independently, and then later Penguin has umbrellas. Okay, kind of odd. Selina Kyle's eccentricity and her seductive nature and her kind of preoccupation with like sex and violence and stuff definitely comes from this as well. I think she's actually a great deal more explicit here, if you can believe that, than she is in that movie. She is an entirely different character, but she is crazy like she is in that movie, and maybe on a similar level. Like her initial motivations are different. In Batman Returns, it's an origin story for her. It isn't that for her in this. She's a more competent character from the start in this. She's more sure of herself. She doesn't start as the secretary with low self-esteem. That whole thing is gone in this, but she is completely out to lunch. And in this, she has this whole kind of fetish bent that she arguably kind of has in Batman Returns, at least in the wardrobe. Like, it seems like that's maybe coming from the same kind of like bondage culture place, which is this script's words, not mine. It describes the Catwoman mask as a bondage mask, and it's talked about that way. And in this, Catwoman's catchphrase is something along the lines of, I think people should indulge their fantasies. Actually, I think I got that verbatim. I think that is what she says. And she says that a couple times or more. And so she's very interested in acting on her impulses and doing whatever she wants, damn the consequences. And she has this weird preoccupation with sex that like really puts off everyone and confuses people, even the men that she's seducing. And she uses her feminine wiles to get what she wants, like Batgirl says in Batman and Robin, but she also seems to really enjoy that herself. Like, it's not just a way to manipulate people. It feels like there's, with Catwoman in this, a whole backstory that is missing that we really need. I guess I'll get into some departures now. Like those are the big major things that are the same. There may be one or two other little things that I'll get to as I go along, but Catwoman is gets an origin story in Batman Returns. In this, we don't really know where she comes from at all. Like, I could describe her abilities and certain prevailing character traits, but I couldn't tell you anything about why she is as crazed as she is. It's almost as if we needed like a female version of the Joker, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that she's anything like Harley Quinn or she's actually like the Joker, but just in that you have this really wild, wacky, like I don't know what she's gonna do next, unpredictable kind of character like the Joker was kind of supposed to be, and then the Penguin is a foil for her in that he is a lot more down to earth. So they're both criminals, but he's simply the Penguin trying to gain power and maybe some prestige. He has that kind of typical comic book like mock sophisticate thing. This is a script that doesn't really have much of a take on the Penguin. I felt like he was a pretty generic character. Like, we try to play him really menacing, where he's able to like use his birds to kill people that he doesn't like and he's not happy with. He's insecure about his penguin physique. He doesn't like being called the Penguin. It is about outcast to some degree, like Batman Returns is, but that movie brought that way more to the fore and made it a lot more about the kind of primal animal nature. In this, the animals are kind of just used in more like superficial, for the most part, clever ways to kind of like describe each other in comparison to each other. So we have a whole thing in this with a griffin that's discussed, which is kind of a cool idea, where we're trying to make it look less arbitrary that we picked the Penguin and Catwoman, where no, these are natural things to put together because like in going back to antiquity, these are things that literature and mythology have put together before. So we've had in mythology, a creature that is part cat, part bird, part lion, part bird. So we bring that in to kind of make Catwoman and Penguin a unit, but then also to say that they're very much opposites and they're about different things, and at the end of the day they're ultimately not really going to get along, but that's a cool way to justify that before it's a really interesting idea that really made me think. Thematically, what this movie would have mostly been about is the haves and the have-nots. It's about getting to the bottom of why Gotham is as corrupt as it is. This movie ultimately is all about unraveling a mystery about how Gotham got this way, and so it's a good follow-up in that way, where Batman '89 is look how corrupt this city is, and one of its many bad apples killed Batman's parents, and Batman's going to be able to get his revenge at the end, but it's supposed to be a righteous kind of vengeance, I guess. And then this movie is how did it get that way in the first place, and why is there so much income inequality? And so we set it at Christmas to have this juxtaposition of this is supposed to be the time of goodwill toward men and everyone to help each other, and we're all equals and we all have compassion for each other, while the homeless and the downtrodden, the poor in Gotham are stepped on, kind of like Max Schreck does in Batman Returns. That character's not in this. There is a kind of tycoon type character who does bad things to poor people to make his life better, that I suspect was the inspiration for Max Schreck. Nobody is anything like as over the top as Christopher Walken's character, I would imagine, even on the page in this, but it is really a true meaning of Christmas kind of movie. At the beginning, it started to read a lot more after school special than I think it ultimately gets to at the end, when the curtain is peeled back and we get to the five families, which is a really recent idea in the comics to this script. The first reference I could find of the five families was in the Huntress miniseries from 1989, and this was written very shortly after that, and is a thing that I think Snyder has played around with, and some other folks at DC ever since then. This idea that when Gotham was founded, there were five rich families that basically divvied up the city and ruled it together separately, and they're kind of a secret society, and that's where all the corruption comes from in the first place. And so throughout a lot of the movie, it seems to be just a really kind of like dull heist plot where there's these bird statues, these raven statues that Catwoman is after because she's been hired by the Penguin to get them. And so she's a cat burglar. On paper, right at the beginning, I guess this isn't a movie. It's actually all on paper still, but the initial idea seems to be this is Selina Kyle right off the page, and then the farther you read, the more like very crazed and out there and nutso she turns out to be. Oh, you know what? Another thing that this does that Batman Returns continues with is, of course, the relationship with Selina and Bruce. Although here it is something of a love triangle because Vicki Vale is still around. It's not an aggravating love triangle, and it doesn't really last too long before Bruce figures out that she's Catwoman. So you don't have the big finish where they both come to realize that after they think maybe they've fallen in love, but that it's a very forbidden kind of romance in Batman Returns, that we're Batman and Catwoman and we have to fight now because we're the hero and the villain, that's what we're supposed to do. It's a lot more subtle than that in this. At first, this story reads a lot like an episode of the 1960s show, but with more of an edge and bad guys actually killing people, because, again, it's just about burglars doing a heist, trying to get these MacGuffin devices. And so there's these five ravens, and the Penguin's after all of them, and we don't know why. And Catwoman, we follow quite a bit going to get each of them, and that's how she's ultimately going to wind up meeting Bruce Wayne, which is maybe less contrived than it is in Batman Returns, that she ends up meeting Bruce, independently of being Catwoman. And so the reason that she winds up at the manor is because she is looking for one of the five ravens there, because she knows that the Waynes were one of the five families. And there's this question raised for a minute about whether or not like Bruce's father or grandfather or great-grandfather were bad people, that they helped to put together this horrible society. And it does call into question his great-grandfather's morality, but his father really pushed back against this, and we're going to find out, and I don't totally know how I feel about this, but we're going to find out toward the end that we do have that kind of conspiracy thing for the death of Bruce's parents. We are doing a little bit of that Spider-Man 3 thing also, where we have to retroactively add to the origin, and it's not as retcon-y as that is, but it's not just somebody in an alley that kills his parents. It has to be a planned thing, a hired gun. It has to be premeditated, and it can't just be a random crime. The reason it's better here than it is in some other things like the Gotham TV show is because we already knew it wasn't a random crime. From the first movie, we knew that we had Jack Napier, who was a hired gun for a mob boss who went and killed Bruce's parents, and we actually didn't know why. So this reads less retconny. I don't, in general, just like the idea on the face of it, this is how Bruce's parents got killed, that it's a conspiracy, but at the same time, I already didn't like that it was the Joker's alter ego that did it anyway. So I guess ultimately that's okay. It's hard to read that reveal and not roll my eyes a little bit where I'm like, well, of course it's gotta be, like, their death has to be important. I mean, I guess it's important in something like Batman Begins also in that they're positively influential people, and their deaths made a difference and changed things in Gotham to some degree. But like the damage was already done, so I guess it's fine. It just wasn't like the best reveal for me because I don't love that idea, in the first place. So at the end of the movie, I guess I'll just jump there for a minute. We end up with a big climax that takes place in Wayne Manor and in the Batcave. You get the sense of just using all of that set, like we're all over that house, and then we're in the Batcave. I would have loved a moment where Batman in some room goes, I never thought, I don't think I've ever been in this room before. But Penguin will, and this is a real classic, again, the 60s Batman did this, did things like this anyway. It's a real kind of classic move to have, for a minute, one of your villains like find out that Bruce Wayne is Batman and wind up in the Batcave, and they go there because they think that that's where the secret treasure is buried. So we find out that it's kind of this weird Indiana Jones thing where when you get all 5 of the Ravens together, it gives you not the treasure that Penguin is after, because he just wants wealth and fame. That's all he's after. Again, not super interesting. He doesn't just get the treasure. He's going to get a map that leads him there, and the map leads him to buried treasure. And where's it buried? Under Wayne Manor in the Batcave. So that's kind of fun. It's buried treasure that's supposed to be in the Batcave. And so it turns out that Batman's actually been sitting on a lot more wealth than he even thought he was. And Batman's character arc in this, such as it is just about his feeling like he's not able to do enough as one man, even as wealthy as he is, and even with all of his gadgets and training. What Batman wants to do, and this is very Nolan oddly, is not just to be a Band-Aid, as he kind of puts it, but to make real significant change in the corruption of Gotham. And arguably by the end of this movie, he doesn't really accomplish that. And maybe that's the point, is that he can't really do much more than he's doing, but he's trying, and that's all that matters. We get a pretty nice discussion with him and Vicki about how you've got all these poor people in Gotham. Bruce throws as much money at that as he can, and then as Batman, he goes and he tries to stop the bad people that keep the poor people down. But at the end of the day, this is like a systematic thing. It's or a systemic thing. It's a system that was established like a couple of 100 years ago, and it's really difficult to break that system down. And there's not really anything by the end of this that starts to break that system down. It's just Batman finds the treasure, and he dispatches of the villains, and then he uses the wealth to open probably an orphanage or something to help out poor kids. He doesn't say specifically what. And again, that's weird because that's a thing that we also do at the end of Dark Knight Rises. Like I said, lots of stuff that reminds me of later things. The very next movie, Batman Forever, is going to have a climax that happens in the Batcave, or I guess a pre-climax that happens in the Batcave. And it's villains figuring out that he's Batman, but not to go there and steal treasure. And so I'm not saying that I needed this to be a tear down the system thing, although in this particular case that could have been really interesting, where it's like if Batman somehow like brought down this society, like it's really just here's where the treasure is more than there's like a quarter of the house thing, which is where I thought it was maybe going, was something sort of like that, where like there's this secret society that's actually really running everything. It reads to me more like it's about the way Gotham was established in the first place than it is like a scary like underground like ruling council or something. And so by the end, I just wish that Bruce would have a conversation with Vicki or Alfred or someone, again, like following up on what he was talking about earlier, and like how much of a difference he, at this point, after this adventure, he feels like he's making, and especially in bringing in somebody new to the fold. So there are a couple of big things that the original script for '89 attempted to do that didn't wind up in the final version. And they both wind up in this again, and don't end up showing up in the final version. One of them is Batman on a horse. It seems like Sam Hamm is obsessed with this image, and it's better here than it is in the first draft script for '89 because he's paralleling his great-grandfather and what he stands for versus what that guy stood for. And there's a really cool moment where where Batman on the horse is like kind of staring down his great-grandfather, and I like that idea a lot. So if it had to be in a movie, I kind of wish it had been in this one. Not that I would have wanted this exactly wholesale, because, again, I think it would have been, if shot exactly as it is here, it would have been better than Batman Returns, but I don't think would have necessarily been a great movie. But anyway, the other big thing that both scripts did is brought in a Robin, and in, if memory serves, kind of similar ways. In the '89 version, it's in the first draft version of '89, it's way later in the game, and it's seeded a lot better in this. I also think that it's, like the horse thing, more thematically relevant and more relevant to what Batman is going through in his character, and the biggest departure from what the character is in the comics. So here you have a Dick Grayson who, I guess he was an acrobat, but I don't know if he was in the circus or anything. But instead of being found in the circus, and instead of Bruce, like, finding out about his parents' murder and then going to help him out and making him his ward, in this, he is a street kid, and he's one of the homeless. And so you have this really great comparison contrast with Bruce Wayne, where Bruce is worried that he is out of touch, being, in the wealthy elite, and he's doing everything he can do to appreciate and understand and help the downtrodden. And then you have this kid who is the downtrodden, outcast, poor kid, who, if we got more adventures with that version, because we don't spend enough time with him here to really get too much interaction even with Bruce, perhaps you would see them influencing each other, and you would see Bruce coming to appreciate that plight more because of who his Robin is. But he is like constantly kind of rushing in to help out at various points in the movie, and he's really capable, and he's had to be that way because he's been living by himself on the street. And it's, if any character gets an origin in this, I guess it's him, but we don't really talk too much about what happened to his parents, and he's not Robin already. He's going to sort of become that in this, but he does already have the costume. and this is the thing I think surprisingly kind of works. So he has the kind of, and we do it sort of like we do Batman Forever, where the costume exists already. It's not created by Alfred or Batman, and it's like a uniform he wore, again doing like some kind of acrobatics, and he does have the R on it already, and it doesn't stand for Robin yet. It stands for Richard. So I guess each of the people on his team would have worn their first initial on the shirt, which is like not a cutesy origin thing. Like it makes a lot of sense. His real name is Richard. He's got an R on his shirt, and then later we'll repurpose that to stand for Robin. I also really like putting Robin in this script. Again, over 89 and even over Batman Forever, because of this kind of bird motif. And I don't think we do anything like super poignant or deep with that, but it does make a lot of sense to introduce Robin in your movie with the Penguin, both a couple different kind of birds. Robin is more of kind of an underdog and a Spitfire, whereas the Penguin is very cold and calculating and flightless. And so there is kind of a comparison, certainly, that you can make there. He doesn't feel shoehorned in like he would have if we threw him in 89, and it seems like it was kind of the 11th hour that he was taken out, because I have a Robin action figure from Batman Returns. Robin is not in that movie, but they made action figures, and I suspect, when I was a kid, I thought maybe it was just, well, they know kids will buy Robin, and they didn't get around to getting him in this movie, so they should go ahead and put that figure out anyway. I don't know that that kind of thing ever happens. At this point, I'm thinking it's that the figures were commissioned when they were still looking at something closer to this script where Robin was going to be in there. Maybe not exactly this, but something before he got taken out. And I think with the main ideas of this story, it made a lot of sense to have him here. So I like that Vicki Vale is as integral to the plot as she is. I like how proactive she is in this. I kind of wish she still had Knox to bounce off of. And I wonder if the only reason he's not here is because Sam Hamm wanted him to get killed off at the end of the last movie, so even though that didn't happen, he wasn't going to put him in this, because in his mind, Knox is dead now. But I don't know that for sure. Vicki is pushing back on the corruption really hard. She wants to turn in any story, no matter what interests might be ruined by people who are associated with the newspaper, which gets her into trouble in a place. There is and this is where Batman gets framed. There's a scene early on where Catwoman, in trying to steal the first Raven statue, ends up fighting a bunch of people on a dock, and there's this drug running scheme that's going on, and the guy running the drugs is friends with, he's a mob boss, and he's a friend of the newspaper, and so that gets Vicki into trouble when she tries to report on it. And I like that her relationship with Bruce is real strong and deep seated here, and it's not really a romance. They play. I mean, like, obviously they are a couple, but we never like stall out things to do any like major character drama with them in their relationship, or to get real, sappy about it. Like, they're kind of just partners now. They could have opened this movie married already, and indeed at the end, the gift that Batman gives her is a diamond ring that implies that maybe they're going to get engaged. It doesn't say that it's an engagement ring, so I'm not sure how it would have played in the scene. It was really ambiguous about that. But there's this odd moment at the beginning where Batman's being, with Alfred, really brutish and trying to figure out something, and you get to the end of the scene and he goes, "I don't know what I'm going to get Vicki for a Christmas present." And so, there's some good setup and payoff in this, but some of it is odd things to pay off like that. You get to the end and we kind of bookended the movie with that. Oh, okay, and he finally bought her a ring, and maybe it's an engagement ring, I'm not sure. Bruce is not Michael Keaton in this. I cannot begin to see that actor playing this version of this character. It's like Sam Hamm read. It's like Sam Hamm wrote a sequel to his own script, minus a few things that he just has to live with that made it to screen that were different from his initial script. But it looks like he's going back and adapting from the same material that he was adapting from in the first place with the '89 script, instead of really doing a sequel to that movie. And that's fair, because he's wanting to do some character stuff with Batman, or at the very least he's wanting to make Batman feel like a somewhat like real relatable character, instead of being as standoffish and walled off from the audience as Michael Keaton's is. And so I just could not get Michael Keaton's voice in my head with this, and every time I tried to, it felt really silly. And so even if something closer to the story had gotten, it had been what they made, his dialogue would have had to have been retooled real hard, and I'm sad to say probably quite a bit of it cut down. Like, I like that Batman's not as monosyllabic in this as he is in the other two movies, and I feel like in Batman Returns, he seems pretty out of character in how just out of touch he is. And so we went too far in compensating with that and trying to make him more like he was in '89. But in this, I mean, he's comic book Batman coming back to this into this world, and there's some nice continuity stuff. We go back to the Flugelheim Museum. We're with Selina Kyle there, where she is a museum curator, and that makes it easier for her to get into these kinds of places so that she can steal stuff. She has that kind of like Master of Disguise thing that she has in the '60s movie, which in the '60s show, which is funny because there are places where this feels to me like almost like a half adaptation of that, but just, you know, serious and darker, because you have half of the villains from that movie, and then you have a Selina Kyle seducing Bruce Wayne at the same time as Catwoman is fighting Batman in this version, very much trying to seduce Batman also. And anyway, some of the action in this reads really cool and ambitious, and a lot of the like set pieces and just how long they go on, and how they feel like part of a more modern crime drama instead of the more kind of noirish thing that Batman '89 felt. Really Nolan. Like, that's one of the other things that really reminds me of Begins in Dark Knight Rises, or it begins in Dark Knight and then into Rises. And also, while I'm there, this curiously has a similar underlying theme that Rises has, with the rich out of touch people, perhaps including Bruce Wayne, keeping everybody else down, and the class warfare, and the drug running stuff very much reminds me of the way we dealt with Falcone in Batman Begins. So, going back to the Penguin real quick, like I said, he's pretty generic and in a little one note. I guess another thing that Sam Hamm, this would be the third big thing that was, I just remembered this, that was in his initial '89 script that he felt the need to bring back in here, but times like 10, is the sonar device that brings in a whole bunch of bats. He does it in this like 3 times and with different animals. Like, we have that device for Batman with bats, but we also do it first and more often with the Penguin with birds, where he keeps kind of creating Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds in order to get the things that he wants. So he'll make the sonar thing happen, and then all these birds show up, and there's kind of this weird I don't want to say that there's like a big bat versus bird fight, but I think kind of that happens. Like Batman and Penguin both do that to each other, and it's like, I was expecting a bunch of cats to run in at some point too, and then we reveal that Catwoman's also got one of those. But yeah, Penguin has that thing where he wants to be upper crust, but he's really not, and I just don't think the writing for his like mock sophisticate voice is real convincing. Like he speaks a little bit too plainly. I think he should have more heightened language, whether he's good at it or not. Like maybe he uses like the wrong words, or that don't really mean what he thinks they do, or he just uses a lot of really big, like $12 words. But I have to keep kind of reminding myself that that's supposed to be the Penguin that we're looking at, because it kind of just speaks in a real generic kind of mob boss sort of speak. I do think it's interesting that he has a lot more compassion and looks at people as real people more than Selina Kyle does. I expected something more ambiguous for Catwoman. Like the comics, that's the place that's the biggest departure, is that she's much more of a like 60s Batman Catwoman, where she's a straight up bad guy. Yes, that Batman can't help but be infatuated with, but there's not any inkling whatsoever of, she steals things, but she's got a heart of gold. She has the most violent kill in the movie. By the way, it's a pretty bloody script. I don't know that it ever could have gotten made, as it is. And I think parents would have had some of the same complaints with this version that they did with Returns, except maybe a little less because it's more substantial story-wise, but I don't know how much of a difference that really would have made. But there's a scene toward the end where Alfred gets shot and we think he might be killed, and then when we jump back to him, it's just a flesh wound in his arm. And Vicki insists that they move him to the couch and to try to look at his wound. And the Penguin like begrudgingly has his henchmen like help out with that. So he's not without compassion. He has a little bit of empathy, and I was kind of surprised to see that. If memory serves, I think he does die at the end of this in the Batcave. I think he falls to his doom. And I can't remember if Catwoman makes it or also dies. I think she lives. But actually, at the moment, I can't remember, strangely. But yeah, I didn't like how much of a blank slate Penguin was, and I didn't like how pointlessly insane Catwoman was. So ultimately, I'm not super impressed with either of these villains, but some of the action stuff we do with them is cool. More Catwoman, certainly, than Penguin. And Penguin gets lost through some of this. Like, he's more of like a plot device to give Catwoman a reason to be here, I think. Like I said, some ambitious action. There's this cool place where Catwoman is actually like trying to, I think it's Catwoman, trying to push Batman up into like helicopter blades. That's pretty cool. Oh, and there's also this bit where we have the whole thing about the 9 lives, but there's nothing even vaguely supernatural about it. And I know whenever I mention the kind of supernatural, look how many lives she has thing with Batman Returns, there's usually somebody that says that was figurative and it's actually more grounded than I think it is. But I mean, like, in that movie, she takes like gunshots, and she falls from a real high place, and like she makes it with all of that, and it always felt to me like the movie was saying she kind of literally has 9 lives. And in this, we just kind of make a joke out of that, and or not a joke, but we make that a motif, and she's constantly like acting more confident because she's a cat, and so she says, "Oh, I have 9 lives," but we don't actually play it the way we do in Returns, where it seems like she's actually spending those lives. So anyway, there are some thoughts. It is a real flawed script, but I enjoyed reading it. There were some ideas in it that I wish that Returns had actually ran with. I think the 5 families thing could have been handled well. I don't think I would have done it through the hackneyed, kind of tired, plot device of the artifacts that lead you to a map. The kind of Tomb Raider thing. Like, I wouldn't have done that, I don't think. But the villains needed to be kind of overhauled from the ground up, or at the very least, given more dimension and backstory. And I kind of wish. I mean, I think Batman's got some cheesy lines in this, but I kind of wish that after 89, he could have been allowed to relax more and open up more and been a little bit more like this. And it looks kind of influential, potentially, just Sam Hamm's take on this, on the way we went with Batman Forever. Or at the very least, it ended up being more like this. So anyway, if you have read this script, I'll leave a comment. Let me know what you think about it. And once again, thanks, James, for reminding me to do this. If you'd like to make a request for a movie to review, or a comic, a trade, or a single, or a miniseries, what have you, you can become a $15 tier member at Geekvolution's Patreon. That's patreon.com/Geekvolution. You can do it one time, or you can stick around on that tier for as long as you'd like to, and I'll put you in the rotation and have you a review as often as possible with as many people as are currently on the tier. It's somewhere between every 2 to 3 months. So I look forward to hearing from you and seeing what you would like requested if you choose to do that. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and thanks very much for watching. I'll see you again next time.